With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to Single Muslim Live, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We're here on British Muslim TV, and I'm your host and relationship coach, Fahima Mohammad. Welcome all you dear viewers watching from all platforms, streaming on Sky TV, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you are in the world, welcome for tonight. I just want to say that I'm really appreciative of everybody that's been commenting and messaging, and we do hear you, and that's why we're here to serve and facilitate all your queries. And if you have any, please do so. Continue to call in on the free WhatsApp service, which is at the numbers at the bottom of your screen on 07950 Or you can call in live to the studio at your standard network rate from your mobile or landline on 01924 231 083. I want to welcome my guest today, all the way from the USA, Ohio. Assalamu alaikum, Yaseen Ganim.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you? All the way. I hope I'm not taking up your time from work, and thank you so much for everything. I know it's like, it was about 4:30 in the afternoon there?
Yes. Crazy times right now. We're getting by.
Yes, of course. But I appreciate the time that you've taken off to speak to us today. We have a very interesting topic. We're asking the question about relationships affecting your mental health. We talk a lot about mental health today, and we normally sort of generalize around what's the actual outcome of that mental issue. But today we want to discuss more specifics, especially around relationships. I'd like to sort of ask you, Yaseen, if you were to maybe introduce what is your take on how relationships affect your mental health?
I think the biggest takeaway when it comes to relationships and mental health is you have to take care of your own mental health before you can expect a relationship to be successful, because those issues that you have in your personal life will come into the relationship if you do not.
Yeah. The thing is, when you say that, do you think that most people even recognize the fact that they even have these mental issues before? Because sometimes we might think as individuals that we're maybe lacking something like happiness or loneliness, and then we turn to a relationship for that. What would be your thoughts on that, and how could we sort of identify ourselves that we actually have a problem?
I think a good part is to see, do you feel like you're happy? That's a great question to ask yourself. And if you're not able to answer yes to that question, then there's something that needs to be addressed. It's kind of hard. Not everyone knows mental health symptoms or terms if you're not in this field. So a simple question asking yourself, am I happy, is a good way to start to know.
We do have a question on WhatsApp. Thank you for that, Yaseen. What do women want mentally from a relationship? What's your thoughts on that?
Both men and women, they're going to want companionship. They want a partner. They want support. Sometimes they want to get rid of that feeling of loneliness or emptiness. But you can't expect a relationship to fill emptiness. That's where people go wrong with relationships. They need to feel whole with themselves before they can go into a relationship.
It's really important what you've just said, actually, because a lot of us, unfortunately, do actually look for relationships to fulfill ourselves. And so you're saying that in order to have a relationship, we need to feel whole, complete, secure, happy. So that really is saying that we need to do a lot of groundwork. What kind of work do we need to do to get that to us, give that to ourselves, most likely?
You have to fill your circles of happiness on your own. So you have to be creative, you have to work, you have to have some sort of relationship with friends and family. All those areas in your life need to be stable before you can expect a relationship to help fill your happiness even more. So filling your own happiness is going to then breed even further in a relationship.
Thank you for that. We did have a comment and a kind of a query on Facebook from Sai Makasa, asking how would sort of like dealing with domestic abuse, for example, affect your mental health and your state of being?
Any type of abuse, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, is going to have drastic effects on your mental health, and that can occur outside of a relationship as well. Trauma is one of the biggest modifiable issues that happen with mental health illness. So whether it's depression or something as severe as schizophrenia, trauma is the biggest factor that is in our environment that can be adapted and changed. So you have to avoid those situations, obviously, if you can. A lot of people don't have the resources to leave these situations, so it just continues to negatively affect their mental health. And after a while, people can really hit a breaking point. And these types of issues, such as domestic violence, does not change on its own. If the person isn't getting help, then it's going to continue to happen, and you cannot believe their apologies without actions going along with those words.
That's very important information, and I hope that sort of answers the question that our guests have actually, put forward. I think it's really important that we actually address these issues, because we look at mental health as something which is external and it's from the other, which can happen. But as we have statistics today that show, in order to have better mental health, sometimes we may get confused by these statistics, because it says if you are in a relationship, if you're connecting with somebody, then it increases your well-being, it increases your happiness. What's your take on that? What's your opinion on that when we have statistics out there that are actually saying this?
I think that's absolutely true. When you're feeling good as a person and then you add the relationship component, you're just adding to the things that are already good in your life. So again, you have to feel good in those areas I mentioned earlier for you to continue to thrive with that happiness relationship. But it just adds. It's like a cherry on top of your dessert. It's just adding some extra to your already wholesome life.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. I just want to remind the viewers that please, I appreciate your comments and questions so far, but please do continue. It's an amazing topic tonight, and we do have a specialist in this field, Yaseen, who is here to help you just for tonight. So please take advantage, take the opportunity to ask him whatever it is that you require, especially if you're going through something yourself today. And the number is at the bottom of your screen. It's 01924 231083. I also want to state that a lot of us, we want to feel happy. We want to feel success in a relationship. So at the end of the day, when we are looking at ourselves, what kind of work do we need to do first in order to get ourselves to that place? Because I feel like people that are coming out of either failed relationships, or if they're not finding a relationship, that can add to that depression or anxiety of meeting somebody, or that loneliness. And if you are in that sort of way of being, then doesn't that actually attract the same? Or is it because maybe you're feeling in that way that you can, have some sort of, opposite? I mean, what's, your thoughts on that? Because there's different studies that show you attract what you are, or you attract somebody who actually, wants to be an enabler or a helper. And that can also add to a relationship in the future as to where that may lead.
So I think that, again, kind of just tailing back to the fact that if your depression and anxiety is not controlled, it's going to bleed into that relationship. But I'm sorry, can you repeat the question portion?
Well, before I do, we do have another question on WhatsApp asking, does your mental health affect your relationship? So if somebody, so basically, is it like the cause of a bad relationship, do you think? Or a result of it?
So that's a very complex question. So if you're dating someone or engaged to someone who's an abuser, there can be a lot of reasons why that person is abusive. This is just one example. Anxiety people with severe anxiety will either internalize it and just feel like sad and in their bed all day, or they'll take it out on the person that's in front of them. So if you have severe anxiety issues, that can end up being an abusive component. If you have a personality disorder, which is not necessarily a disease that is treated with medication, but with therapy, diseases such as depression, anxiety, those can cause these toxic behaviors. But also antisocial personality disorder is a very common one. Like toxic masculinity is a trait of that, that can really to these relationships. So, and the only way to fix that is by fixing yourself first and seeing therapy. If the person isn't willing to do that on their own, then it's not going to be a successful relationship.
You know, it's so amazing that you're speaking like this, because a lot of us, we're searching for partners and we're looking at the other with regards to filling these sort of like boxes, which is career, which is their status in sort of like any other way, their profession, their bank balance, how they look, which is very, very important as well. I'm not taking away from that, but that's so surface, and it just goes to show, do they have to have like a psychological analysis or diagnosis before you go into a relationship then? Is that what it needs to be nowadays?
It would be nice if we could just read their resume of a person and it would say what, mental health issues that they have and stuff before going into a relationship, but you don't know that. But a great tool to have going into a relationship, going to an engagement or a marriage, is to know the signs of a toxic relationship, know the signs of these mental illnesses that you can catch before it gets too deep into the relationship and you've invested too much time. So you kind of have to ask the person, if you see these traits, they need to address them. If they're not willing to, are you willing to put in the effort into the relationship yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, that's very important. I think we are looking at relationships in a totally different light all of a sudden. And I think it's really going to strike a few people. We did have a comment again from Bella Santana. Thank you so much for your comment on Facebook, saying, loving and respecting ourselves first before we start a relationship is most important. Thank you for that. That's so true. And it's very easy to say as well, by the way, because a lot of us, are not actually working on ourselves. We don't have that psychological development or the skill in order to even assess ourselves. So can you give us some components, Yaseen, some real tips if we were to even maybe try and check in on ourselves? What are the common things that, as an individual, if we're looking for a partner or we ourselves are checking in on ourselves, what are the common traits of somebody that has sort of mental illness that can either rub off on, our potential partner or help us, actually feel in a particular way which is not normal or not considered normal?
So the biggest thing you want to do is ask yourself, how do I feel around this person? When you're with this person, do you feel intimidated? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel, do you question your actions before you act on something? Are you on edge waiting to get yelled at for something? If you feel yourself, you don't even have to watch what they're doing. Look at yourself. How do I feel when I'm around this person? And if you answered any of those questions in a way that it shouldn't be answered, then that's a sign. You don't have to be an expert in the mental health field to see that. Just know how you feel personally.
We have another comment from Samara Kelsa on Facebook saying, as a human, it's really hard to have a constant battle that, that you are trying to prove to others that you're only human. And a lack of respect breaks you down. That's also something I was actually going to come on to. Thank you so much for that comment, is that we do get triggered by our own sort of shadows and buttons. And those are terminologies that we use in sort of relationship coaching. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but basically our triggers are something that is against our value, or it's something that we haven't dealt with in the past. So I think the way in which we respond to people is so important, because that shows how we're feeling. And as you just mentioned before, Yaseen, it's so important that we actually do seek that self-development journey and that healing process, because as we know, when we are young, we have the subconscious mind, which is imprinted from a very young age, and we kind of like continuously building this filter like an onion peel, and we need to unpeel it before we even try and be with somebody else. What's your ideas on what I've just said? Because, you know, it's slightly technical, but I think we do get triggered a lot, and I think we do respond, not realizing that our response is actually with you know, something within ourselves, but we actually blame the other.
Mm-hmm. So you have to look at yourself, and what are you thinking to yourself every day? Are you thinking, I'm not good enough? I'm never gonna be good enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not. If you have those negative thoughts and you go into a relationship and that person isn't the right person, they're going to make those negative thoughts even worse. So you kind of have to put like an armor on your exterior and kind of have, you know, go in with self-defense, with your own thoughts before you can go into a relationship. You have to have positive thoughts about yourself before you can go into a relationship, because they're just going to egg on whatever feelings you have. And if they're somebody who's mentally struggling, they're going to find your insecurities and use them against you unwillingly, unknowingly. It might not even be intentional.
That is so true. And as you were speaking, it's funny because you said that you might find somebody to actually sort of like find those sort of traits within you and maybe manipulate you. But then there could be a point where we find partners that actually at the beginning fulfill those lack between, you know, what we feel within ourselves. But then over time, that disappears. And then that's when you think, why has that person changed? Because at first they were, you know, giving me what I required, and they were this way and they were that way. So this is really interesting to sort of like psychoanalyze yourself and the other before you enter into a relationship, because you can actually have that in a different mix, right?
Yes. So again, confidence is key. I've heard so many patients tell me that they would tell their significant other that they're really self-conscious about the fat on their stomach. And when they're in a fight, their partner knows that fat on their stomach is something that triggers them, and to hurt them because they're in an angry fight, they'll mention that specific thing that bothers them. So that's why I stress so strongly that confidence and knowing your worth is so important before going into a relationship, because the person who knows you the best is your partner, and if they want to hurt you, they can do it worse than anyone else can.
Yep, there's a very fine line between love and hate. And we have these moments when we are with somebody that, you know, at the end of the day, they can bring out the best or the worst in us. But yeah, you're absolutely right, having that self-confidence and that self-worth. But what if somebody has tried, you know, being in relationships, or even started a relationship, and it always ends up where it doesn't go to the end, where the outcome is not fulfilled? We have a lot of emails. We deal with a lot of people out there that are commenting, you know, whether it's on this platform or just generally speaking about how it is that you pick yourself up, even if you have that confidence, but you're getting constant rejection, constant unfulfillment. So what would be your sort of guidance on that to help an individual to pick themselves up and try again and to constantly feel that self-worth? Because, you know, obviously they're getting rejected all the time. And I think it's really important that we have this conversation, because even on a platform like this, you know, people are, you know, interacting a lot, and not everything happens where the result is there. So what do you do in that situation?
So my suggestion is, whenever something you're trying isn't working over and over and over again, you have to change a variable. So the only variable you can change is not the other person, but yourself. So ask yourself the question, who do I want to date? Who do I want to get engaged to? Who do I want to marry? And if you're not that person that you're describing, if you're not as successful as you'd want to date, or if you're not as confident, if you're not is put together, then work on yourself to become the person that you'd want to be with, and you'll attract that same person.
You know, we're talking like this and it's all full well, and, you know, but a lot of the time it's people that have gone through self-development. I just want to have a quick shout out from Fahima Mohammad from the Gambia. Thank you so much for watching, tuning in. I really appreciate you and everybody else that's on the platform, streaming from everywhere. And please, if you do want to call in and ask a question, I would appreciate you do so. And joining the conversation. Is an interesting discussion, and I think that it's not necessarily one that we usually have. There's so many questions, so many comments, and WhatsApp sort of messages, and I'm trying to get through to this as fast as I can, and I appreciate it. But if you do want to call in and speak to myself or Yaseen, please do so on 01924 231 083. I want to ask you also your top tips on mental well-being. What would be some of the things that you could actually assist us in that area?
So my best suggestion, and this is something I've taken to heart personally, is filling your daily circles. So let's say you have a day off. You want to do something that's going to make that you're enjoying, such as playing a game, going outside. You want to do something creative to challenge your brain in a different way. You want to do something to fulfill a relationship. So calling your mom, talking to your partner, and you want to do something for your health. So, working out, being fit, eating good foods. You want to add a little bit of each of those different areas I just mentioned in every single day. If you're lapsing in one of those things, it can really affect how happy you are.
Yeah, no, that's true. As I was trying to also mention before, I mean, we are talking on a level here where it's kind of like a different way of thinking, but we have to bring it back to our faith and our culture. And I think when it comes to mental health and when it comes to marriage and when it comes to our culture, there is a real concoction and there's a real mix that not everything can actually, present itself in that way. Because all we know growing up, especially from our backgrounds and faith, is that, we need to study, we need to work hard, and we need to create these families. And there's nothing really much in between. And if we have any sort of like, sort of questions with regards to a person's, qualities and characteristics, it's not necessarily taken on board. Like, for example, in our communities as well, we're very, very well known to, sort of like look for the top sort of professional background sort of people. Like, I remember you telling me before there were some statistics on even GPs, doctors. What was it that you mentioned that I'd like to sort of like, share on the show? Because I think it was a really interesting fact. I don't know if you remember. But, because we are looking for people that we think match us according to their profession. So how does that actually work out in reality?
I think that just goes to cultural stigmas that we face as Muslims, as the Arab community, wherever your background is from. There's so many different sects of Islam. There's so many different cultures, so many different races that all practice Islam. And we have such different, things going on. But a common issue we have is the stigmas. For example, I was a male nurse before I became a provider. So people 20 years ago looked at male nurses as, like as a feminine career path.
Yeah.
So nowadays, I have a lot of people are interested in me regardless of my career of being a male nurse. So just breaking down those stigmas and looking what are your true intentions in finding a partner? Are they superficial via a doctor, or are you looking for substance? Because you can marry the richest doctor but have no happiness versus someone who's a nurse or a social worker and have 10 times the happiness. So look at your own intention. Yeah, no,
that's very true. That's very true. I mean, the criteria that we have today are obviously your own, and you can have your own criteria, but we need to analyze, are those those criteria for your actual fulfillment in a relationship? We did actually have another comment and question asking, how do I support my partner who is going through a mental breakdown? I think that's a really important, interesting question. And maybe a lot of us are not actually aware as to how to support that when we are faced with that situation in our homes.
Patience is a big one. A lot of times someone will feel bad for their partner for the first week and, support them for that first week, but then they'll get irritated at that situation and that they're just doing it for attention, or just trying to, they're just lazy and don't want to get up today. So having patience and perseverance and supporting that person consistently is going to be key. Getting them resources is, of course, the most important thing. Assessing their safety. Are they thinking suicidal thoughts? Do you have to take them to the emergency room? So just being a consistent support, and know that it's not going to happen overnight. Even if they do go to the hospital, it still might take several weeks or months to feel better. But putting in that investment during a time of need for your partner is going to be vital and really help keep and sustain a relationship healthy.
That is so important. Thank you so much for that, Yaseen. The other thing I want to add to that is that it takes a lot of strain on a relationship to actually have, even if it's you dealing with the other partner going through mental sort of like strain and stress. And yes, it takes a lot of patience and understanding. Do you think that that actually can move over to the partner who is being supportive for them actually going and having some sort of like distress themselves as well?
Yes, it's kind of like when a woman gets pregnant, her husband gains weight too. So, you're in a partnership, you need to realize that it affects each other. So if you're the one with mental breakdown, you also have to know that that person, your partner, has feelings too. And just because you're going through something difficult doesn't mean they aren't. So mutual understanding between the two is very important.
As you are obviously practicing this sort of like thing, and this is your field, obviously there are many methods of, dealing with mental illness. One of them is prescription, and there's a lot of like holistic things that is around it. Can you give us some information with regards to this? Because a lot of us, I know for a fact that they think just taking some antidepressants, for example, if they need it, that's the only thing. Personally, I feel that it has to be a holistic approach. But before you answer that, actually, I just want to quickly have another sort of comment read out from Facebook. Men usually hide their inner feelings. How do they ask for help when they need it? I'd love for you to answer this first, as it is a comment on Facebook. I'm sure you can obviously highlight some information with this.
So again, that goes back to stigma. I believe the question was men, you said, hide their inner feelings? Yes. So
yes. And how do they sort of like, reach out, and how, so they get themselves to that point where they can actually get the assistance they require?
Persistence is going to be key. Continue to ask the same questions. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Even if they continue to say yes, 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 yes. So you have to be persistent. Another technique you could do is asking their best male friend to maybe interject in the situation. Hey, can you check on him for me, just to see if they maybe are shy of looking weak in front of their partner. Going back to family members for help, don't ever feel shame in going and asking for outside help, especially if the feelings are difficult. But hopefully our culture will continue to destigmatize, because that's a really tough question, and if there's no right answer, it's very individual. So you can't really answer that without knowing the situation.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I mean, as you mentioned, we should really go to our family and friends, but we do find that even with men, they are actually held and looked upon like as if they are the stronger sort of like gender, and they can actually handle these things, and these things don't actually come to them, and they should be able to deal with it. So I guess that is not just a stigma, but it's like an actual culture out there that is really something that even if they have a close best friend, that's probably the last thing that they want to do is actually talk to them about this particular thing. So yes, seeking professional help and outside assistance is definitely something that needs to be considered, and it's safe. It's a safe space. It's non-judgmental, it's private, it's confidential, and that's something that you do need to consider. And thank you again for those comments and those questions. It's so vital. It just goes to show that highlighting these topics and bringing out these sort of issues is real, and people are struggling, and we hope to assist more and give more guidance. As I was mentioning before the question, Yaseen, there are different methods of getting this assistance. Obviously, there's talking therapy, there's exercise, there's taking antidepressants, for example, if that's what you require from your GP. But some people may only take the one or take one or the other. What's your thoughts around the whole idea of gaining sort of a holistic view? And I know it does differ from case to case, and we are generalizing here. Obviously, you have to be seen professionally and make sure that you do that. But I think a lot of people, from what I hear, they are only taking the antidepressants, for example, and that may be the only thing that they actually do. What's your thoughts on that?
So a lot of people think that if they start a medication that they have to be on it for the rest of their lives. You at least want to be on an antidepressant for 12 months, but it is only one part of your mental health. So the issue in our culture is there's a lot of people who think taking medication is like a bad situation, that you're interfering with God's wishes for you by taking a medication when it comes to mental health. So I think what you have to ask yourself is, how bad is my day-to-day life because of my anxiety or my depression? Do I need a medication? And talk to your provider about that, because there is so much stigma about just taking a pill, which is actually very safe, very well studied, and underused in the Muslim community, actually. And then there's other people who solely believe that the antidepressant is going to cure them. The antidepressant is just one component. As you said, holistically looking at it is as well. One of the companies I'm going to be working for requires every patient that sees a prescriber, someone who prescribes medicine, to also be tied with a therapist, because that's what the research says works the best. So when yes, we'll give you the pill, but you also have to talk to a therapist, or we're not going to give you the pill because we want it to work in the best case scenario. So it's adding every single component. And then life coaching is like a third thing that you can add on, getting you to the gym, getting you to eat healthy, getting you to do all these different things to kind of add to the pill, add to the therapy, just look at it from all different angles.
That is so useful advice. Thank you so much for that. It's so important that we hear professionals like yourself say this, because there are people who's really struggling out there and thinking that only one thing or two things makes a difference, and that's why, you know, it may work for a while and it stops. But you do need, like, for example, the pills to sort of maybe get you jump started, get those chemicals in your bodies working, and then the rest follows with what you just suggested. We do have a comment on Facebook right now asking, are families to blame for mental health because of the pressure? Because they put the pressure on someone to get married. Do you think parents are to blame for this?
Yeah, that's another cultural issue. I don't think that pushing someone to get married is going to make your son or daughter happy. A lot of parents believe that, oh, you're depressed because you're not married yet, because you're not close enough to your dean. You know, you can't. That might be a tiny component of it, but that's not the case in most situations. So forcing your kid to get married is actually going to make them more anxious and more depressed. I just actually read a story about I'm on the platform TikTok, who a very well-known Muslim TikToker who, you know, got divorced because he was kind of pushed into a marriage and he was depressed, and he was, you know, thought he had to get married. So a few months into the marriage, they ended up getting divorced. So that's just an example, and that, you know, that's not the right answer. You can't force someone into a marriage. That's not what our religion preaches.
Yeah, no, that's so true. We have so much issues around this question because we are brought up, obviously, as Muslims, trying to fulfill our faith, and it is drilled into us. But I think it's so much more that we need to consider between ourselves as people, how we are feeling, how is our mental state and well-being before we even invite ourselves to be part of another person's life, or, you know, basically take on another person's responsibility as well, because it's a lot of pressure just doing that. A lot of us are either rushing into it or delaying it because of the fear and the anxiety, and that can also add to it. So yes, thank you so much to that caller that's questioned this sort of like comments and everything that you're doing so far. It's absolutely amazing, and there's so much interaction right now on Facebook, which is absolutely great. Please do keep them coming in. We're trying to get through to it as much and as fast as possible so that everybody's heard, and shout out to everybody that's watching as well. We do appreciate you. Yaseen, when it comes to our families, I know we've sort of touched on this and we're going over it, but I think it's really important that what would be the sort of like things that you would maybe guide our parents and the older generation in thinking. And I know they say that it's very difficult for our elders to change their mindsets, but what would you sort of like, you know, advise maybe a young person that's looking to get married but not actually, you know, ready for it or not finding it, and they're feeling depressed and they're feeling pressured? You know, what kind of conversation that needs to be had, and what are these sort of like discussions that parents need to be open to? What's your opinion on that?
In my experience, the best way to attack that problem is by going back to our deen, because our deen actually does preach that there's no compulsion in Islam. You shouldn't be forcing religion onto anybody. You shouldn't be forcing these negative things that our culture tends to do. So growing up, your parents always say Muslims shouldn't do this, Muslims shouldn't do that. Well, this is the one time you can use that against them, not in a negative way, in a positive way, and say, well, Islam says you cannot force me to do this. Islam says it's not healthy to try to have an arranged marriage, or that I shouldn't marry someone just because they're not from the same village or nationality as me. Islam says you can marry everyone, no matter, regardless of their race, ethnicity. And unfortunately, that's an issue. Also, converts and reverts are having the same issues finding partners because of the cultural stigma. So if you find someone that you want to marry who's a revert, then make sure you show the Quran to your parents, and show them that that's what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted you to do, is not look at race when it comes to marriage, but looking at the person and their deen and their mental health and all these components that you're looking for in a partner.
That's such useful advice, and I think that's so true. If our parents are living in this cultural, traditional way, and quoting one or two remarks and quotes from the Quran or the Hadith, whatever it may be, which is true. But yes, you can actually go back to it and look at it in a much more wider sort of aspect, where you can actually still live your faith in a particular way where it may not be where you're actually getting that pressure. And so I guess we need to educate ourselves, with what we actually believe in, our faith, with also regards to our mental health, and how we need to sort of move forward. As a young single Muslim yourself, you do have obviously challenges, and but again, when we went back to the question, I don't think we went fully into it. When you're constantly rejected, when you're constantly, going from one relationship to another, I think there's a lot of also lack of emotional intelligence for the other. That's why people find nowadays, if they're in a relationship, the other thing is there's different statements out there to talk about narcissism, there's talking about sociopaths. But I think the main thing today I want to also address, which is not really talked about much in our communities, is that if something doesn't work out, the amount of repercussions from it is so detrimental, which is actually ghosting. Okay, but before we get into that, we do actually have a caller online. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, can you hear me?
Yeah, walaikum salam. Kya haal hai?
Can you hear me? You're live on British Muslim TV.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to say?
Well, what are you talking?
What is your question? You called into British Muslim TV and we're discussing relationships and how it affects your mental health. What is your comment, sir?
You speak Urdu?
No, unfortunately, I don't. I'm sorry for that. This is an actual English speaking channel, and I personally do not speak that language, so I really do apologize that I cannot help. But do WhatsApp your question, and we will actually try and get that through to our guest today, or myself. We will try and help you out. As I was talking about some of the methods that I use today, and especially in today's society where ghosting is something where it's really prominent in our sort of relationships, where you don't know how to tell them it's not working out. You don't know when you're starting off in a relationship and it's something you don't like. So I was listening to a famous guru speak about being a leader, and it's not about being the boss in the boardroom. It's about actually being able to stand up and go first, and actually have uncomfortable conversations and put yourself out there. But I know that the repercussions for this, for individuals that are ghosted, it actually does create anxiety. It does create you second guessing your self-worth. There's so many scenarios out there. We can look at it from so many different perspectives, and I want to bring in this perspective as well, as to how we are treated, and how, even if that treatment isn't good, obviously that other person has to deal with it. But being on the other side when you are ghosted, because we are talking about relationships, and these are kind of the issues that we actually are facing. We don't have to go to the extreme of all the time, because even these little things that people see as little are actually quite traumatic to an individual, like ignoring them, which is the new terminology of ghosting. What's your thoughts on that?
So know that in today's times, there's the benefits of this technology that we have. We get to meet so many people so quickly, such as that Single Muslim app, for example, where you have access to so many different people. The downside of that is you're also going to have so much rejection. So just know that 30 years ago, you wouldn't have had all that rejection because you would have not met as many people. So that's the reason you're facing some of the rejection. And also know, I speak to patients all day long who are in relationships and looking for relationships. The person you may think is the most best looking, successful person gets ghosted just as somebody who, as myself, who I don't think I'm the best looking, most successful person. I get ghosted, but also the most successful guy I know gets ghosted. So it happens to everybody. So you shouldn't take it completely to heart.
Okay.
And that's easier said than done.
We have, sorry to interrupt you. Thank you for that. That's really important what you've said. But we do have a brother, Mo, online. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. You alright?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
What would you like to say?
Oh, I would say, I want to know what you like talking about, basically.
We're talking about how relationships affect your mental health. Do you have any sort of comments on this? Do you have a question on this? Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Probably, sometimes relationships do, you know what I mean? If they're having something really bad in their past, do you know what I mean?
Do you have any sort of questions about relationships affecting your mental health? Anything specific? Is it your own experience or what you've heard?
Yeah, sometimes it's like loyalty, do you know what I mean? You don't trust some persons, do you know what I mean? Like if you got hurt by someone really bad before, but you can't trust the other person then, do you know what I mean?
No, I completely understand. I totally understand what you're saying, and it's really important what you've just mentioned, actually. That's a really good point. Was there anything else you'd like to ask?
No.
Thank you so much for your call, Brother Mo. But do stay with us in case you want to go back and, ask you what you think. Because, so, Yaseen, what's your sort of opinion on people finding it really difficult coming back from either having disloyalty and he's got maybe some trust issues and he's gone through an experience which is quite detrimental? Like, it's not that simple to go through. What would you say about that?
You need to go through the...
It's just normal.
You think it's normal, sorry? Or you think this is not normal?
Yeah, it's normal. It's normal. I'll go with normal, you know what I mean?
Okay, so you think it's normal. Okay, let's ask our expert. Yaseen, what's your thoughts?
So the question is coming back from disloyalty?
Yeah, and not having the trust issues and feeling that it's normal that people may be doing this, and how do you overcome this?
So the biggest mistake people make is that they jump into another relationship to heal. So the best thing to do is actually take time to yourself and rebuild that confidence, and also go through the healing process, which isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time.
Okay. Brother Mo, did you hear that? Oh, sorry. He's just, we can definitely, you can actually email any other questions you have, but I hope that's sort of given you some sort of insight. And hopefully, if you do want further advice and guidance, call in, and we're here. I am your relationship coach for SingleMuslim.com, and we're here to actually help you and facilitate myself and my guest tonight, Yaseen. So do send me an email or any comments or questions, whichever platform you use. We will try. We do have another question on Facebook. A sister is saying that she's, her husband's actually saying to her that she's psychotic. And so how does she stop feeling that way when her husband's kind of constantly telling her that? That's a very good point.
Saying, I'm sorry.
How can she change his perspective when she's being sort of constantly told that she's psychotic and controlling?
So it's gonna. The correct answer I can tell you is that also working on yourself, but maybe like a couples therapy is actually an underused tool. Whenever you're playing the blame game with each other, the best way to handle that is with a third person who doesn't have an interest in the party. So asking your mother, his mother, or your mother-in-law to handle that situation would be inappropriate because he's going to bias the husband. So you want to ask an independent third party to be involved in something like that, because that's going to be really hard to overcome just between the two of you. But also look at yourself, and if you're having any symptoms of mental health, if you're really psychotic, which is a serious mental health issue, that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, no, that's really important. Actually, what you just said is that we do still need to seek outside professional help, and there are couples therapy and coaching available. So you do have the outside perspective to help you, and I hope that helps with your question and query so that you can take this further and get your issues resolved. We do have another question. Does social media affect your we're actually having lots of comments and questions, and one of them is, does social media affect your mental health, especially within relationships?
Yes, social media is quite addicting. A lot of people actually have to go to like a rehab for social media and the internet and pornography and all those things, because that it can be so addicting. It's releasing endorphins every time you see a new notification. That's happiness, that you like get a little spark of joy. So that spark of joy is addicting and can then cause negative effects to yourself and your mental health. So you have to keep it at control. I can say myself, as someone who's very active on social media, that's something I struggle with. You know, trying to balance not being on my phone 24/7, but being in the moment. There's just such instant gratification that happens when you're on your phone on social media. So you have to be very careful with that. And if you need help, you might need to ask for it.
No, that's so true. And that's such an important question. Thank you for that, because that brings another conversation with regards to how we compare and we look at people on social media, which is just a couple of second snapshot. And we're comparing it like to say that, you know, maybe our relationship's not that great, or we're not looking that great and everything is so great. And we're comparing it actually distorts information and helps us feel even more negative if we're feeling that way. So yeah, that's absolutely correct to actually double check yourself and how you are coping and be in the moment and be sort of like mindful and present, which is really important right now, and stop comparing to other people, because as easy as it is, especially in today's society and with the, you know, the vast amount of information that's bombarding us every day, it's really important that we try and, you know, contain ourselves in a healthy way of living. And as you mentioned before, with the balanced sort of lifestyle that we have to live. And going back to even what we had a question before about the husband sort of like, you know, naming and sort of, you know, saying things to the wife. I mean, we're talking about, obviously, a lot of it was about relationships maybe before entering it. But when you're in a relationship for long term and you can lose your habits to being more comfortable and being more yourself, but then you can actually lose interest in your partner where they don't give you the same attention, they don't give you that same comfort. So that's also another issue that we need to consider within mental health. We do actually have another question from social media. Someone says that their spouse is very attention seeking and it's really affecting their mental health. I think it would be the same sort of answer, but what do you think? Is there anything else that they need to do, Yaseen, if one is, you know, finding that sort of like an issue?
So I would have to do an assessment of that situation in particular. People like to throw away the word attention seeking out when it's not necessarily true. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's social media is what they use for their business, and it's part of their success. So you have to, it's a really difficult thing to judge from the outside. But again, people give a distorted image of reality on social media. They put their best picture that's photoshopped up there. So if you're comparing yourself to those false realities, you're not going to feel happiness within yourself, because they put their best shot out there, and it's not necessarily the truth.
No, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's so true what you're saying. And we do need to be more sort of aware of what we're actually doing. We have a shout out to Naeem on one of the platforms from Pakistan. Thank you so much. And Mohammed from Afghanistan, and all the viewers from around the world that's watching right now. It's absolutely amazing to hear so many people from different parts of the world that's actually streaming right now. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all your comments, calls, and just you viewing today. keep your questions coming through. I'm trying to read through them as much as we can, even during our conversation. The other sort of thing I want to quickly touch on before the end, as we have come, so quickly towards the end, but is when you are in a relationship and it's quite detrimental when you are sort of so much invested with time, and whether it's you being in a long-term sort of permanent marriage for many years, we can sometimes lose ourselves with regards to how we treat ourselves, let alone the other. And do you think that what would be some of the advice you'd give when you are in a long-term relationships for many years and either one is not being appreciative or, checking in? What are the sort of relationship advice and tips that individuals and couples can have and take away for themselves to maintain that really good mental well-being? Because when you're together, sometimes we might forget ourselves or forget the other person because we're in a normal sort of like habit. We, come home, and when we're out at work, we obviously have a projected self and we have a particular persona. When we come home, we relax, which is a good thing. But sometimes the other partner doesn't want you to always relax. They just want you to also give them the attention, for example, or that compliment or whatever it may be that you're seeking. So what is your thoughts on that, Yaseen?
Think about a relationship as like going to the gym. When you first start going to the gym, you're going to work out every day. You're super motivated. It's fun. It's exciting. You're going to have, nice results. But after time, you're going to stop working out as frequently and you're not going to have the same results and you're going to kind of go stagnant. So the key to keeping a long-term relationship successful is to keep that working during the relationship, even though the relationship is old. So 10 years into the relationship, you need to continue to put that same effort that you were putting in the beginning, and that's hard to do. The best way to open up that is communicating. It's so easy to just do your separate thing, go to work, come home, and not talk about anything. But if you're not talking, then you're not working out that muscle of your relationship. So you need to talk. You need to do little things like, bringing flowers home, going on date nights. You need to continue to do that even 10, 15 years down the line.
Wow, that's so important information, and I hope that's really helped for couples out there, because it's so true what you're saying. We don't actually work at it, and when we actually work at something, that's when we can get those results. And don't think that, you just mentioned that it's been maybe 10 years. We don't need to do the same things that we may have done before. But it's so true. Thank you so much for that. That was so enlightening to hear. We have another question. We have... he wanted to ask, what should you do if your loved one shuts down and wants to be alone? That's a really tough one as well. What's your thoughts on that? If your loved one shuts down and wants to be alone?
So again, kind of discussed this earlier a little bit. Whenever somebody's in that state, you want to be persistent and just show that you're supporting them. And you may need to give them time. Everyone is different. There are some people who, when they're having extreme sadness, they want to internalize it and just be alone for a little bit. And you need to learn to give that to them. For me, when a loved one of mine is sad, I'm in their faces trying to get them to tell me what's wrong. But sometimes that's not always the right approach. Sometimes you have to give them time to digest it themselves. And if that's and then in time, be persistent in asking, are you okay? Are you okay? And they should be able to open up. So it depends on the type of personality. Again, some people internalize it. Some people want you to be in their face and give them that attention when they're just feeling sad. Some people don't.
That is so true, though, what you're saying. But unfortunately, maybe none of us are probably equipped for actually realizing the actual time that somebody needs. So I think that what would be the safe time, a safe time that someone can sort of say, enough's enough, we need to seek the help, because we don't want them to give them too much time or too little time, but it can be detrimental if it's not the right time. And I know it also differs, but there are sort of maybe studies that say if you're feeding so long for maybe way too, like 2 weeks or more, that's too long. Like, is that something that you would say?
I can't put a time frame in without knowing the situation, but what I can say is if they're getting worse, then you need to intervene. If they're staying the same, you can give them a few days or whatever and just eventually intervene. But if they're getting worse or continuing to deteriorate, or you're worried about their safety, then you have to intervene. But again, everyone's different. and it depends on how they're behaving. So just monitor them is the best advice I can give.
That's really useful again. Thank you so much. You've given us so much insights, and I have so many questions, but unfortunately we have come to the end of the show really quickly. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate everything that you've said. Thank you all for watching, all your comments, and the callers as well. Thank you so much, all of you, for tuning in and watching. Inshallah, we will continue with the show, and we will continue answering your calls, your questions, and my takeaway really is we do need to sort of have more self-care, and inshallah you do find your perfect match and partner. You can download SingleMuslim.com on your Android phone. You can join us and hopefully find that perfect match for yourself. If you have any issues, please do email, and we have several female guests weeks ahead, so that inshallah maybe we can have more of your questions answered. And I hope that you'll be emailing me all your sort of like queries and any comments. And I'm here to give you the free advice as your SingleMuslim.com relationship coach. And inshallah, all we're doing is just trying to serve you so that you can have the best relationship moving forward. And I hope that, your takeaway today is mine, is that we do need to work on ourselves. And inshallah, when we do, we attract that perfect partner in the future. But I really do want to say again, thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope to see you all next week with a new topic and another guest. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a lovely night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you. Good night.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.